Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy. This is the Benchmade 484-1 Nakamura. This is the -1 version, which gives you carbon fiber and S9DV, just like the 940-1, but there is a vanilla 484 version, which, is a little less expensive and uses M390 and G10 instead. So just keep that in mind during the review here. I want to thank my buddy John for sending this along. He's JAF Blades EDC on the Instagram. Check him out if you'd like. But let's do a quick little size comparison here. Right here, we've got the Spyderco Delica. Bam, there you go. Here's the Spyderco PM2. So this is a sort of an intermediately sized everyday carry knife. It's a little bit longer than your Delica, a little shorter than your PM2, etc. And of course, your Ontario rat number 1. Pardon me, and your rat number 2. Perfect. So there we go. Again, nice intermediate size EDC sort of thing. There's not going to be a disassembly video on this little guy because my buddy John actually recommended against it. He said this one was very, very finicky, and, well, I'm always at the owner's discretion on these sorts of things. I don't just take apart everything that comes across my desk without permission, so no problem there. But the thing is, this is not a problem because this is going to be pretty similar to your Benchmade Valet in terms of takedown. It's an axis lock knife with full liners and whatnot. It shouldn't be too terribly difficult, and check the Valet video out if you're trying to get a decent reference for how this might go. So, there we go. Let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this particular little pocket knife. So on the good side, first off, the size of this guy is very nice. It is a relatively small knife. It slots in there in the middle between your less than 3-inch and your 3.5. I mean, that's quite literally a statement of measurements and facts, but nonetheless, it's a good little size for EDC, and the weight is also pretty good as well. You're looking at 3.3 ounces, basically, which is A-okay. You can throw this guy in your pocket, especially with this deep carry clip that Benchmade will send you, and you're not going to have any problems with it whatsoever. It's there when you need it. There's enough blade for when you need a blade. But, so I like very much this size, and I appreciate that it's not really huge or also really, really tiny. So that's good. Next thing I'll say is I do like the maker's mark on here. I'm going to see if I can get this on camera because the laser engrave is a little tricky sometimes. But right here, you've got that little Nakamura maker's mark, and, well, honestly, it's pretty. I appreciate it very much. So that's good. The pivot collar on this guy is nice. It's got this nice little bluish, looks like anodized titanium, but it could be something else. But it's very nicely done. It's pretty, and it adds some visual interest to the knife. And you've actually got matching back spaces in here as well, with that same kind of hue of blue, which is just nice. So that's good. The ergonomics on this knife are actually quite good. The extra deep carry clip in the back here serves to fill in the hand a little bit more, and then these finger grooves for my relatively small hands actually fit my fingers. Then my thumb goes to the ramp. I mean, this knife was really, it feels very nice in the hand. Sure, if you bear down super hard on it, there were a couple of little hot spots in there. It's not perfection, but at the same time, it works very nicely for small sorts of cutting tasks. No problem at all. The carbon fiber on here, I'm also going to comment on, is kind of nice. You can see there's a little bit of horizontal milling. You can also see the texture of the carbon fiber, and it is actually full-on carbon fiber. You can see it's the same texture all throughout. Sort of reminds me of the ZT carbon fiber in a lot of ways. So that's very nice. I mentioned already, I think, that it's got the full liners, but in case I didn't, it's got full liners. And this just gives it a little bit more durability. I mean, given it's not a super thick, hard-use sort of blade, but that's always a beautiful thing to see, and it lends it an overall sturdy sort of feeling to it. And then, I gotta say, this has some of the very best aspects of being an axis lock knife, in that it does absolutely fall shut when you disengage the axis lock, and you can actually flip it open. And it's spectacular in that way. And also with the thumb stud, it works nicely too with a little bit of wrist. So overall, there's a lot of good here. This is a nice, and that just summarizes the good here. It's got a nice axis lock action. The full liners are nice. Carbon fiber ergonomics, the pivot collar, and the little blue accents really do lend something to this particular model. I like the maker's mark. It's subtle but pretty excellent. And the size of it is quite nice. It's small, but, still works nicely. Oh, also well, actually, no, never mind. I'm going to go into that in the great. So let's go there. On the great side, what I was about to start talking about is the blade. I like the blade very much on this guy for a couple of reasons. First off, it is not terribly thick. I mean, it's in the same ballpark as the Spyderco Delica. It's a little bit thicker over here. Probably, yeah, it's right around the same vicinity as the Rat 1. And so with this grind, it's pretty nicely done. It could be a little thinner behind the edge, maybe, but honestly, I'm pretty happy with this. It's a nice little slicer. And with the S90V steel, maybe it couldn't have. But anyways, that's the next thing. The S90V steel is good. S90V is a fine steel. It's good to go. It's going to be nice and wear resistant. It's going to hold an edge for a while. It'll be maybe a little of a pain to sharpen, but S90V is one of those steels that I can never turn up my nose at. And then finally, I actually do like the swedge on this guy a lot, although it does add a little bit of sense of murderosity to it, looking vaguely daggery, although you'll note that there's a completely flat surface on the top here. It does allow piercing cuts to be a little bit more straightforward than in a situation where there's zero swedge at all. I'm trying to find if I've got a knife on the table that doesn't exhibit that. Well, either way, you know what I'm saying. This swedge can be a very nice thing for allowing, like if you poke into a bag of sand to open it up, something along those lines. So either way, the blade on this guy to me is what's great. This is a very nice blade design for actually using in everyday carry. On the bad side, first off, I gotta say, I'm not a big fan of the first production numbering that Benchmade puts on their knives. It just, if I opened a brand new knife and I saw that written on the side of my blade for no damn good reason, I'd be kind of disappointed. I tend to like cleaner blades, though, and maybe for some people it's, you know, it's a little thrill, but it sure isn't for me. And, you know, honestly, I've never seen anybody on a forum say something like, oh, I'm looking for a, you know, first production, you know, random Benchmade model. And in fact, I've seen a number of times people saying things like, oh, I love that model. I'm waiting until they get the first 1,000 out there so I don't get one with the writing on the blade. Whatever, that's just an aside, but I really do wish that they do something a little bit more subtle, just like, you know, 82 out of 1,000 written up there or whatever. I think that would just be a nicer way to go about doing it than just printing the whole damn thing on the blade. Seems ugly to me. But whatever, personal opinion here. Something a little less opinion-based is that the detent on this knife is pretty bad. It's very, very soft. And not only does that mean that this knife pretty easily pops open with a little bit of sideways force there, which could be a problem in a variety of jurisdictions that use silly gravity knife laws, but also it means that for thumb studs, chances are you're gonna want to be using a little bit of wrist. Whenever I use the thumb stud on this guy carrying it, I always wanted to throw in a little bit of extra wrist. I understand that making a good detent on an axis lock is a very different thing, because it's really a question of, see if I can show this off, the slope of the edge of the knife right there. This little tiny piece here, if that slope is too strong or too severe, it's going to be hard to open the knife with the thumb stud. And if it's too, you know, shallow, it'll have a poor detent like this guy does. But nonetheless, I really wish that the detent was a little bit harder, and I feel like Benchmade has done better in the detent department on some of their other stuff. And then, of course, finally, the thumb stud is in the slicing path. Speaking of thumb stud opening, you know, it's not the end of the world, I'll be honest here, and the thumb stud does actually look like it's removable. It's tooled for Torx here, so maybe with a little bit of heat you could pop that guy off and then just open it using the axis lock anyways, which is probably what I'd end up doing. But having it right in the middle of the slicing path is not a beautiful, beautiful thing to me, especially if you're making deeper cuts, like for instance into foam or something like that. Whatever, not a huge, huge deal, but there you go. That's the bad to me. The thumb stud is in the slicing path. The detent is honestly just way too soft, I feel like, for this knife, and the first production thing really leaves me cold and would make me a little sad buying a brand new knife. Let's talk about the ugly. So on the ugly side, first off, unfortunately, this knife suffers from a very common fault from Benchmade these days, and that's called vertical blade play, where if you try and do a little something like this with the knife, you can feel the blade rattling around. I don't know if you can hear that or not, but you can definitely feel it if you're handling it. It's kind of understandable how that can happen with the axis lock. If the lock isn't ground perfectly, well, the ramp that is, then it can reach the end of its path and still not be completely in contact with the blade. It's not terribly dangerous, and if you are concerned, you can just keep a little thumb on the axis lock stud, and it shouldn't pop loose. But it is still something that's deeply ugly to see on a knife that's, you know, more than 50 bucks or so. And this is way more than 50 bucks. That actually brings me to my next point, which is something I'm saying on all my Benchmade videos lately, which is that Benchmade's quality control is just terrible lately. It's February of 2017, and Benchmade is at a really, really bad place. They are sending knives out the factory that should never have left the factory. Knives that have vertical blade play, that have horizontal blade play, that have actions that are just terrible when the axis lock can be such a beautiful thing. And so my current recommendation is that if you insist on buying a Benchmade, you should do it at a brick-and-mortar store, where you can try a bunch of the exact same knife you're looking at and find one that's got a smooth action with no vertical or horizontal blade play. If you do that, you're probably going to be happy. But you unfortunately need to play quality control because they just seem like they don't have a quality control team. Knives just fall off of the lineup into the freaking boxes, and that's terrible. And you can also just, roll the dice, and if you get a bad one, send it back to Benchmade, but in that case, build the shipping into your price, and that just makes the prices higher. Which actually brings us to our third issue, which is that the pricing on this knife is completely out of touch with reality. Even if this were made perfectly, there was no blade play, it was from a company that had a quality control division, anything like that, this is crazy. I will often do my reviews without knowing the price and try and estimate, kind of based on what I know of the materials and what I know of the competition, what the pricing should be. And this has some very close competition, even from Benchmade. The Benchmade Valet is very similar in a lot of ways. It's got another very high-end super steel, M390. It's a relatively small knife. The materials are a little bit less, but that goes for about $170. There were other good comparables. The Spyderco Chaparral, which has a lesser steel and fake carbon fiber, but it's in the same department, about $100. Spyderco Mantra, which has a slightly better steel, at least in my opinion, M4. And it's got full titanium, and that's at $170. So I have this guy in my mind at about $180. The thing is, though, they want $270 for this knife, which is absolutely, completely ridiculous. They are on crazy pills. Even the vanilla one, the one that's got the G10 and the M390, which is a very similar steel, is $190, and that's about the right price. So I just don't know what they're thinking with this pricing, and even worse than that, Benchmade uses minimum advertised pricing, such that every retailer has to sell it for their prescribed price. So the market can't adjust to say that price is insane. We're going to sell it for what it's actually worth, unless you're on the secondary market. And so for me, that is just deeply ugly. This knife is just priced out of control, and I don't get it. And especially when you couple that with the poor quality control that leads to the vertical blade play. Oh, is that ugly. So Benchmade, I don't know what you're on, but I want some of it. And the end result, though, is deeply, deeply ugly. Let's do the final conclusion here. Look, I mean, at some level, this is a very nice knife. I would even call it a great knife. I mean, it's got a blade that's meant for cutting. It's got very nice ergonomics in the hands. The materials are great. Carbon fiber, blue anodization, S90V steel. And it is a very nice, smaller, everyday carry choice. I would love to recommend this knife every day of the week. But unfortunately, the price on it is just so ridiculous that I can't even come anywhere near that. Even if Benchmade's quality control team was perfection incarnate, and every single one of these you took out of the box was just known to be absolutely on point, the price is really, really high. And with the current state of Benchmade, the price is just insulting. $270 buys some really incredible knives from some really incredible companies that actually give a damn. And so I'm really, really torn, because I think that you should try and buy one of these knives, but you can't pay what they want for it. That would be ridiculous. So if you want this carbon fiber and S90V model, wait for one to pop up on the used market. I'm seeing them these days on the Blade forums. And again, this is February 2017. It may change in the future. Check your prices again. But I'm seeing them popping up around $185 is what they're selling at reliably. And that's a fine price for this knife. I would be A-okay paying that money for this particular knife. If you'd rather do a brand new knife, you might consider the vanilla 484, which has the G10 and the M390, and that's running about $190. It's not a great value, but it's okay. I could pay that and still, live with myself in the morning. And if you're willing to go used on that guy, you can get the vanilla version for like $130, which is pretty damn good. But So I'm just in this weird place where I recommend this knife, but at Benchmade's official price, you should come nowhere freaking near this knife. You don't even give it a second thought. So if you can get one used, you should totally get one. Or if you get a screaming deal on it, because I don't freaking know, but you should definitely consider this guy. But if you're thinking retail, this is a great knife, but it's not that great. And especially when Benchmade doesn't give a damn about the quality, I just can't send you this direction. So there you go. I really wish I could be recommending this guy to the hills, but such is life. Hope this has been interesting, and, well, have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.